Welcome to the first of a three-part series of Fraud Watch interviews. Today, we're here to learn about the check is in the mail, or is it? I'm Gretchen Batra, an AARP volunteer with Fraud Watch, and today we've got Randy Birkeland, who is a postal inspector and going to really enlighten us about the many issues that happen in terms of the post office and our mail. Now, if you have questions or comments, you can type them into the section on your screen. So take advantage of that. So, Randy, many of us aren't familiar with postal inspectors. So can you tell us what you do? Are you a law enforcement officer? Do you carry a badge and a gun? Can you just enlighten us about what a postal inspector does?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. Postal inspectors are the law enforcement branch of the post office. We've been around for well over 200 years, and we investigate a wide variety of crimes involving the post office and the use of the U.S. mail, for instance. I'm sure some topics we'll get into later, but mail theft, various sweepstakes scams, mail frauds, and then obviously that encompasses a whole variety of topics. But we do carry badges and guns. We arrest people, so to speak. We testify in court. We assist prosecutors, both local and federal, with arresting and investigation of various federal and state offenses.
Okay, yeah, there's some stuff we'll dig into more in a few minutes. Older adults are too often the victims of fraud, and I'm sure you've seen many cases. Can you highlight one or two or three cases and tell us some details about them as they relate to older adults?
Yes, ma'am. One of the more obvious examples that I see would probably involve maybe some sweetheart scams, what we would call. A lot of older folks may be widowed, and they may try to re-enter into relationships or maybe the dating scene, if you will. They might be trying to use various social media sites or dating apps, and unfortunately, there's a lot of predators out there, so to speak, that are trying to find that lonely individual who might be susceptible. And it starts out, it's usually the same type of MO, if you will, Gretchen, where they never meet the individual. They may rarely talk to the person. And then the person on the other end presents a hard luck story of maybe being stuck somewhere overseas or just needs money. And it usually begins with something simple like that. Maybe a wire transfer or requesting money. And then once that suspect realizes that they've got that person, Gretchen, they'll unfortunately bilk them. Sometimes I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars here, even in the Carolinas, and the victim is maybe embarrassed, come forward or file a report. They don't want their family to know. Specific cases I've been involved with where the victim is adamant, don't tell my family. I've seen elderly folks have to go back and re-enter the workforce because they've taken a mortgage out on their house and sent it to this fraudster. Real hard luck stories like that. Many times these fraudsters are overseas, which makes it even more difficult to identify and arrest them. But once in a while, we'll get lucky here in Charlotte. We've had some success with identifying some money mules here in North Carolina. And we've arrested some of those folks and had them prosecuted in some current court cases. That would be a real obvious one, I think, that may affect more, Gretchen, more older persons. The sweepstakes scams you hear a lot about right now, that I think some of the publisher clearinghouse I'm hearing a lot of. I don't know if that's resurfaced where you may be notified or via, if you've won a lottery or some sort of foreign sweepstakes and they just need a processing fee, handling fee, and it starts out with a low dollar amount, and then the fraudster just obviously continues to bilk the victim, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And there again, you might have you have to be really, really careful about any relationship, or I guess you could say anything you've allegedly won that involves upfront money. That's the key. They want upfront money, as whether they call it a processing fee or a handling fee, whatever the case. You're probably being targeted. A lot of times they'll hide their phone numbers to appear that they're in a local area code where you live, where the victim lives. They can spoof their area code. They may be even calling overseas. So I guess the bottom line, Gretchen, any scenario where someone's asking for money up front, and it could appear to be a small, maybe $100 here up front at first, and then that amount will grow over time. And that's a clear indication that you might be dealing with a fraudster.
Yeah. The Federal Trade Commission, in terms of their statistics for 2019, romance scams bilked the most money out of people. It's just amazing. And as you say, people are embarrassed to report. And the one thing we need desperately is for people to report so we can protect other people. So since COVID-19, have you seen any new scams or any new trends in terms of the Postal Service?
Well, it seems like with regards to all the related COVID benefits that were offered by the federal government, most of the fraudsters seem to be targeting the federal government, whether it's small business loans that were meant for small businesses to make it through the pandemic, literally to keep the lights on, or if it was the unemployment insurance fraud, where individuals could apply for unemployment insurance if they were negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. We've seen everything from identity theft committed via that way, where they may steal your name, DOB, and social, and file unemployment benefits on your behalf. You would never even know it unless you tried to file yourself. So most of those COVID-related scams, Gretchen, seem to be targeted at the federal government, because the federal government is the one offering the assistance. Not so much at individuals per se, unless your identity was stolen. And I have seen a lot of cases of that. And that seems to be completely random. We know that these individuals can purchase victim information off the dark web, your name, DOB, and social. And then obviously with that information, they could apply for unemployment benefits amongst a whole other host of other things.
Yeah, that happens during tax season as well, where somebody gets out ahead of you and files for your tax return. Okay, can we just back up a sec? Because way back you mentioned money mules. Tell us a little bit more about what that is. That might be a new term to people.
Well, we would define a money mule as sort of an intermediary between the victim and the eventual fraudster. Fraudsters have evolved to where they may originate in foreign countries, and it makes it hard for law enforcement to identify and arrest them. And a decade ago, it was very suspicious to wire money overseas or to mail money overseas. So there are a lot of folks that sent off a lot of red flags, and it was fairly easy to detect. So these fraudsters have evolved in that they use an American middle person to receive those funds from the victim. So whereas 10 years ago, it would seem suspicious to mail money to a foreign country, in 2020, it's not suspicious at all for you to mail money to another city in the United States. And that's what you'll see where, for instance, if a victim in Asheville, North Carolina, was solicited and thought they were paying a processing or handling fee for a lottery that they won, they may be told to send that money to a post office box in Miami, Florida. And that may appear legitimate to the victim in Asheville, because they may say, well, I'm not mailing it overseas, therefore it's not suspicious. It's going to someone in this country. So that middle person, Gretchen, is what we would call a money mule. They're kind of in on the scheme, quite frankly. If it weren't for them, the scheme probably would not be successful. And then sometimes money mules can be arrested and prosecuted. It's a case-by-case basis, but I have seen it happen.
Right. Or somebody gets a check for $5,000 and they say, deposit the check, you keep 300 of it and deposit the rest. And
Correct.
so then you become a money mule, and then eventually you find out that check was fraudulent and you owe the money. It's really just amazing how creative the fraudsters are.
True.
Okay, well, we don't want to scare people with all of this, but we want people to be alert. So what can people do to protect themselves?
Well, there's a few things that they can do for free. Now, I've worked financial investigations specifically for over a decade, and I run the gamut of everything from stolen checks to identity theft to money laundering. And one of the things that they can do that's free in the state of North Carolina is that you can freeze your credit. That will prevent a fraudster from using your name, DOB, and social to open up any lines of credit. So that's free to do in North Carolina. You can freeze it and unfreeze it indefinitely as many times as you want. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't affect your credit score. But what you need to do is you need to freeze it with each of the three respective credit bureaus: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Create an account with them. It's free. You can freeze it, like I said, unfreeze it indefinitely. I keep mine. Mine's personally frozen. That way, no one can open up any new lines of credit if someone gets my name, DOB, and social. And like I said, it doesn't affect your credit score at all. That's free. That's the best advice I can give. In terms of identity theft, monitor your credit report. I see a lot of identity theft investigations. They'll use the victim's legitimate address because obviously they do that because banks, they know that Gretchen resides at 123 Main Street and she's lived there for 20 years. If a different address was used on a credit application, a bank would look at that. It should be suspicious. So they'll use your legitimate address, Gretchen, on that loan application or that credit card application. And you may get, if a credit card or a bank loan is applied for and approved, they may get documentation at your house, and you may get a piece of mail from that bank, and it be addressed to you, and you may think it's odd, or you may just discard it and not even open it. But that could be, a clue that if you open it up and it may say congratulations on your new, credit card with this bank, you would know that should send up red flags immediately so that something has happened. So monitor your mail. You can look for a suspicious change of addresses. The Postal Service, if someone forwards your mail, they'll send a notification to your legitimate address. If you see anything that looks like your mail has been forwarded, that's a red flag. You can contact postal inspectors or to your local post office. You can go to talk to someone at the post office and tell them that you didn't authorize this. And that's all free, to do that. So you just really have to be vigilant with the mail you receive, your credit report. Again, you can freeze it, which I highly recommend. You can suspend mail delivery while you're, if you go on vacation for extended period of time. Those are just free things that you can do that can help prevent you proactively from being a victim of fraud.
Back to the credit freeze, that's one of the times that you need to use your Social Security number. They do ask for that, so you have to put it in. And the other thing to remember is to put your PIN numbers for those three credit bureaus in a very safe place, because if you want to unfreeze your credit for some reason, you need that PIN. And if you don't have it, then you have to write to them and give them a variety of information, and it takes longer. Otherwise, you can unfreeze it for a short period of time just to do whatever you need to do. But do keep track of the PINs. And as I said, that's one of the times you do need to give them your Social Security number. We guard our Social Security numbers like hawks, but that's one time. How about when I do presentations, I tell people don't put your outgoing mail, especially if there are checks in it, in your own outside post box. Does that make sense, Randy?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience and having done this for so long that if an individual is targeting checks, typically they would try to steal from businesses because obviously businesses have larger bank accounts and can be victimized more so than you or I. I personally put my outgoing mail in my mailbox outside on the street. I wouldn't leave it there. I wouldn't necessarily put it there. I put it there as soon as I think it's going to get collected, if that makes sense, the day of, and I live in a typical subdivision, so there's a lot of traffic. And if you live out in the country, I think you might be okay. If you want to use we call them blue collection boxes at the Postal Service, or whether it's in the lobby or outside, those are safe as well. If a check is typically stolen, in terms of statistically speaking, we see more of that theft occurring from businesses in larger cities, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things I do tell people is to use a gel pen when they write their check, because there's this thing called check washing, and people can use the fraudsters can use a chemical and just take off who the check goes to and how much, but keep your signature and then rewrite the check. So, and I do suggest to people that they take their, especially real important mail, to an inside box at a postal, if they're, in an apartment or someplace, they put it in an inside box. Or another thing I've heard about is fraudsters that fish in those big blue boxes outside the post office, where they put say a water bottle, put sticky stuff on the outside, attach a string, and then put it down into the box and pull it up and see what all attaches to it. There was a case in New Jersey where they actually filmed people doing this, and they did it during the night. So it's as I said, the fraudsters are very creative. Have you heard about that one?
Yes, I've probably seen videos. I've seen them so far as to put a tow winch up to a blue collection box and literally tow it off the bolts of the cement. But I can assure you that it's a federal offense. We take it very seriously. We'll investigate those feverishly, hopefully arrest them. We'll go so far sometimes as to put discrete cameras up at post offices if we think a location is susceptible to vandalism or break-in, whether they be discrete gear cameras or they be hidden cameras in the lobby of a post office. If we have an area of concern, we will investigate that proactively. And hopefully, we've had some success in the Charlotte area with the investigating and arresting check thieves. But I think the most important thing is the reporting of that, Gretchen, and that if it's not reported, we don't know what happened. So that's why it's imperative that victims report that to us at the uspis.gov and file a complaint. And that's a central clearinghouse that we can go in and we can find the complaints in the particular area of the country or the state, contact you directly. It's just like filing a police report. Sometimes if a victim files a police report with their local city or county sheriff, sometimes we have no knowledge of that. Particularly in Charlotte, our territory covers all the way to the Tennessee border, as we discussed earlier. So it's a huge territory that we cover. And if you maybe live in a more rural county away from Charlotte per se, we may never know that there's a problem out there until victims come forward and file those reports with us.
And as we both said, people are hesitant to report because they're embarrassed or they don't want anybody else to find out or whatever. So that's a dilemma. So for people with us on this interview, please, the key thing is report, 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 because it helps all of us in the long run. Well, one of the things that I also do hear is people say, well, I did report it, but I never heard anything back. And it's a complicated, long process to bring fraudsters to prosecution. Can you tell us what some of the process is there in terms of when you do find a case?
Sure. Well, let's take Lenore, North Carolina. I'll just make that up.
Okay.
If we determine through, maybe we get a lot of complaints from customers about stolen mail or checks or something, and we may say, we've got a problem up there. We need to investigate. We may talk with the local police or the county police. We may go, we'll have to talk to victims. It's a paper trail. We would start with, in a stolen check case, you'd start with a copy of that check. You determine who cashed it if you can. You'd have to go to that bank where it was negotiated. You'd have to hopefully get some surveillance footage if it's available, so you can get a picture of the suspect. And then, the big issue is determining who that suspect may be, the identification of that suspect. Sometimes, we can investigate it. We may spend months and months and months on a case, and sometimes we can't identify the suspect. Original checks are hard to come by. It's very seldom that we can get original checks to try to process them for fingerprints, but we do have a laboratory. Postal inspectors have their own crime lab outside of Washington, D.C. So we can submit, evidence for our fingerprint submission. But, in 2020, it's so hard to get original checks. But if we get lucky, we've had some success in Charlotte where we might get an individual on video. And one of my colleagues, we had a large case of a gentleman that was stealing residential mail in the Charlotte area, and he was doing it 2 or 3 in the morning, which you can imagine makes it very difficult. But we identified him. We went so far as to put a GPS vehicle tracker on his car, discreetly, unbeknownst to him, so we could track his movements. And then we determined when and where he was stealing mail. And then we worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Charlotte and determined, it was basically decided he was such a menace that he, those resources were needed to prosecute him. So we have to, get an arrest warrant, or many times we might indict them through a grand jury, with the U.S. Attorney's Office. But in this case, he was such a menace, affecting so many victims, stealing their mail and their checks and their credit cards, etc., that we arrested him about 3 o'clock in the morning because we were able to track him with that vehicle tracker. And we literally arrested him in a cul-de-sac in Charlotte at 3 in the morning while he was actively stealing mail. And he was prosecuted and convicted, and he's serving a prison sentence in federal prison right now. But to answer your question, Gretchen, that's kind of the steps we take. It starts with a complaint. That's first and foremost. Talk to the victim, interview the victim. Start determine, getting the paperwork, the bank statements, the copies of the checks, the bank surveillance footage. Building a case like that, how many victims are we talking here? How much money are these victims out? And then building a case like that, and then hopefully through good police work, we'll develop a suspect, identify that suspect, and then we'll sit down with prosecutors, and hopefully whether we do it through a grand jury indictment, present it that way and get an arrest warrant, or if it's such a menace that the person has to be arrested sooner than later, we might just get an arrest warrant for him or her and arrest them that way. So that's kind of taken, and these investigations have taken anywhere from 6 months to a year, quite frankly, Gretchen.
Exactly. And so people sometimes say, well, I reported, but I never heard anything. And they get frustrated. And the reality is it takes a long time to build the case and bring it to justice. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So do you have a badge? You're not in unit. Do you wear a uniform?
No, ma'am. There's my badge. There's my credentials. Like I said, I carry a gun as well. We don't wear uniforms. We're Postal inspectors and title, but much similar to what you might call a special agent with any other federal agency, such as the FBI, the Secret Service, DEA. We work hand in hand with those men and women in a lot of our investigations.
Okay. And how many postal inspectors are there down in Charlotte?
Oh, in Charlotte, I'm going to take a guess and probably say 10 to 12, quite frankly.
Really?
Not going, yeah, we have offices in Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, Wilmington, and we have at least a couple inspectors in each of those cities. In Charlotte, at least what affects your folks is roughly our territory is roughly I-77. That runs, north into Virginia, and you go due west all the way to Tennessee border, and that would be our territory for the Charlotte office.
So the western part of the state, out our way, Morganton, and further west, are there any cases that you're working on now?
Yes, our office handles a variety of investigations, including obviously the mail theft, various mail fraud schemes, the romance schemes, a lot of narcotics trafficking through the use of the mail. We have a team dedicated to that investigates those. So right now, there's a hot emphasis on COVID-related fraud, quite frankly. To anyone that's might be fraudulently, I guess you could say, committing a scheme involving, submitting false claims to get COVID-related benefits. It's, obviously the pandemic has negatively affected so many people, and it sometimes, unfortunately, brings out the worst of some fraudsters too, to try to take an opportunity to defraud others.
Yeah, I think what we're going to have to anticipate is the fraudsters are going to, because they're going to roll out the vaccine in an organized way, but people are going to start saying, oh, I can get you a vaccine sooner, just pay whatever. And so I just know there's going to be fraud around that as well as we look forward. Well, in the few minutes we have left, is there anything you want to add that we haven't covered? Because you really have an immense job, and it's really interesting to those of us that haven't explored this area much before.
Well, there's a lot of free publications and information on our agency's website, uspis.gov. You can go there to file a report. I encourage folks to do that. Come forward. If you don't report it, it did not happen, unfortunately. And as I said before, if you filed a police report with your local police department or county, sometimes that does not fall into the hands of postal inspectors through no fault of their own. It's just that, as you can imagine, I don't know how many counties we cover in the western part, 30, 40, 50 counties maybe. And we don't know every single, sheriff or police chief out there. But if it's a federal offense, it involves the U.S. mail, you need to notify postal inspectors, and that's the best way to do it. And that way, you're going to be assured that at least we'll have access to that information and can contact you directly, and then take actions to investigate your case.
Well, in the future, maybe the police and the sheriff, and there'll be more collaboration. But it's just everybody's working on this, and so I thank you so much. This has been really informative, and next week, we're going to have Dr. Virginia Templeton from Memory Care talk about how memory issues and fraud intersect. And that's a whole nother area. Again, we'll probably hear a lot of the same issues that Randy's brought up. And in addition to reporting to Randy's organization, we want you to sign up for the Fraud Watch Network through ARP. You don't have to be a member. You get 2 texts or emails a month about current fraud. And so that's important. So Randy, I thank you so much. We just got to meet each other in person today. And
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we talked on the phone before, but thank you. And I'm going to keep you on my list of people that if I have a problem, that I can get information
You
from.
too. You call me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I hope your viewers got some good information out of it.
I'm sure they did.